In this lab, we're going to jump into intrusion detection and get you exposed to how some of this all works. And this lab will be a little bit more complicated. We're going to have a little bit of code. We're going to have some scripting involved, but at least this way you'll see what is behind the scenes with using one of these tools called YARA, which is an open source tool and pattern matching language used for identifying and classifying malware and other suspicious files. Now, in order to get started, we're going to need to get a malicious PS1 or PowerShell script file onto our system. So let's go and download that now. The link that we'll be using is inside of the topic itself, just underneath the video. So you can go and copy that and paste it inside of your virtual machine. So open up Edge and paste that link inside now, and it'll download a Microsoft-patch.ps1 file to your system. Go ahead and open up the file once you've downloaded it, and if you don't receive a prompt like I have in my screen, that's fine. Just navigate to the file itself, right click, and then select Open With. And we want to open it up in something called VS Code or Visual Studio Code. And this might be your first time working with this type of software. And for all intents and purposes, it is a text or code editor, and it allows you to write and edit code with a lot of quality of life improvements like autocomplete and highlighting and a whole whack of other features, including one which we'll use today, where we're going to split the view inside of the editor and look at some malicious code and then look at rules we can create to detect those malicious code snippets. You'll probably be prompted with a little welcome screen. Go ahead and you can close that. It's kind of like a tab in a browser. And notice how at the top it's saying we're in restricted mode. We want to go and select Manage and then say that we trust, that we're inside of a trusted window right now. And that's just a little security prompt for us to make sure that we know what we're doing. In this case, it's totally safe. And here's the code. It's nicely laid out. There's colorized text. It's easy to see. And you can see in the bottom right, it's actually asking us if we want to install the PowerShell extension. And this is one of the benefits of using a code or text editor like VS Code, is it has a whole list of extensions that can improve your experience of working with a certain programming language, and even more so if you're working towards programming a certain type of software like game development, app development, and so forth. There's extensions out there that we can install that provide, like I said before, autocomplete, code snippets, and a bunch of other features to improve and expedite and even secure your code as you write it along the way. And there's a lot of great things to talk about with VS Code, but let's focus more on YARA over here. So we'll select File and do a new text file and see how we've opened up another tab over here. We can start writing things in the YARA language right now. And what we first want to do is declare a rule. So to do that inside of YARA, we would just declare the word rule and then give it a name, which would be the rule name. So in this case, we're going to call it detect suspicious script, and then we'll open it up inside of curly braces, and here we can start plugging in the things that we're looking for. And that's defined by two statements. One would be called strings and the other called condition. From here, let's go and save this file so we can get the YARA extension working for us. We're going to save it as a no extension type of file. And for the file name itself, let's give it a more descriptive name. We can go with something like suspiciousscript.yar, and .yar files is what the YARA tool will utilize. And notice that when we did save the file with .yar, a little notification popped up in the bottom right to install the .yar extension. So we'll select Switch to Marketplace, and we can see YARA over there, and let's just go ahead and install that extension. There we go, much better looking. And you see that red line of text? It's because we had an error there. It's actually condition instead of conditions. And that's what's nice about having an extension, is you'll get those kind of notifications ahead of time, so you don't write a whole bunch of code and then are plagued with a bunch of errors to figure out later. Now let's close off the extension marketplace. It kind of looks like Tetris on the left-hand side. We'll select that, close it, and then we'll drag the suspicious_script.yar file to the right-hand side and dock it there. Great. So now we have our code lined up side by side, and we can start building out strings that match what we see inside of that suspicious file. Now, in order to get the strings portion of this rule to understand what it should be matching against, we have to declare variables. And they really aren't that different than we saw in Bash. $, give it a name, and then put an equal sign, and we can give it a value. So the first variable of A would be who am I, so we're looking for pattern matching of who am I being ran. And then maybe we should look for get local user. That's also kind of suspicious. We shouldn't be seeing that with normal files being ran by normal users on a network. And then we can go and plug in a little bit more. Maybe the C users directory, that would be kind of weird to be running files against there. We can honestly keep going. The more strings we're trying to match against, the better this would be yielding in results as a pattern matching tool looking for something suspicious. So the net command would be good to look for as well too. Maybe ipconfig. We shouldn't really be having users running tools that's trying to plug an ipconfig command on the terminal. And then we can also maybe add one more. And I think netstat would be kind of strange for someone to be running on the terminal as well. Then finally, as a final string to look for, maybe something like start sleep. That's also not normal to run as well. Okay, great. So now we have our strings defined. We need to set a condition of which ones we want to trigger on. So in this case, we'll go with any of them because we're looking for all of these types of strings inside of files. Okay, file saved, good to go. Now we need to run this inside of a terminal, and VS Code has one built in. So that's kind of fun. If we select those little three dots and select terminal and new terminal, we can see we actually have a terminal prompt on the bottom of our code now. And see how it brought us inside of a PowerShell command line terminal with the PS in the front, and it's brought us to our home directory of users administrator. Okay, so now we can navigate the terminal just like before. CD, downloads, that's where we downloaded it. And now we can run YARA just by typing YARA, and we specify the YARA rule file, and then we're going to match it against a destination. In this case, if we specify with a dot, just like we've done on bash, that specifies this directory. So to recap, what happens is YARA will run, it'll take the .yar file, it will look for strings we've declared to pattern match for, it will then go through each file inside of our directory, and if any of those strings we've declared in the .yar file can be found within any of those files, it will let us know in the command line. So let's see what happens. Okay, see? There we go. So we can see the rule name that we declared got flagged on the command line to let us know that it did trigger successfully, and it found the strings that we declared in the .yar file within two files. Obviously the .yar file itself, and then inside of the .ps1 file. And that's really how simple it is to go and do some pattern matching with YARA. It's pretty powerful. And we can make the conditions a little bit more specific as well too, instead of just any of them. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to change that now and show you how you can specify multiple of the strings at once, and that uses some of that AND logic that we've seen before. All we need to do is just wrap our string variables inside of quotes and specify the ones that we want to be using our pattern matching for, and then we can continuously put and any of and do more bracket wrapping and more quotes and keep going. So now by grouping the strings this way, we're actually requiring at least one string to be found for user enumeration techniques, one string for network recon, and then one string for start sleep. This is a little bit of a smarter type of rule because it's looking for specific types of activity this way as opposed to just any of the patterns. So now running it again will give us the same results because the script does contain all of that information. However, if we really wanted to test our logic conditions we've just made, we can go and create a new file here in this directory, and we'll do that with Notepad. Let's just say test.txt, and it'll give us a little prompt this way. We'll hit yes to create a new file, and let's just put who am I inside here. And this way it should fail because it doesn't have the other types of strings that we're looking for. Now let's clear a little terminal over here, and we're going to run that command once more, and it shouldn't trigger on that file, and it hasn't. So still the same original two files because the text file doesn't have all of the conditions met. Now, no rule is a good rule without documentation. And in this case, we can throw in a section called meta inside of the .yar file. And here we can put some things like description, author, version, and let's go and do that now. Because when someone else reads our .yar file, it would be good to have context of why we wrote it and for what purpose. So let's go and give it an author, and we'll call ourselves the YARA wizard because wizards would write code in YARA, I guess. So we'll go with that. And then we need to give it a little bit more information over here, and we'll give it something like a description and then provide some context as to what the code is actually doing. So in this case, we're just detecting recon activity inside of a script. So let's put that inside there. Perfect. Now people will know why we wrote this .yar file. So we can have some fun with it. Let's just run it against the entire system, see what it comes up with. We can save this file now, and in the terminal, we'll navigate to the C drive itself, so the root C drive, and this will give us access to all of the files and folders, and we'll run this .yar file against everything. And in order to run against everything, we're going to need to throw in a TAC-R flag for recursive, which will allow us to run this command against all folders and subfolders and any contents further from there. So let's fire away when we're ready, and it's going to be a large output, so let's just go and have at it. So I've went and just sped things up a little bit here on my side, but it's probably going to take you a little bit longer, and we'll have a bunch of errors there for permissions and other errors that probably occur that we can't really see right away. But if we scroll through, we can see something here. So yes, there is something going on in that file, which probably happened when we downloaded it. It went inside of our cache. And what else do we have here? So it did finally find our suspicious script.yar. And I'm sure if we continued going through this, we might find the odd thing or two. And it looks like towards the end, it looks like there's actually some PowerShell modules like netview.ps1. So it looks like one of those modules actually triggers and meets all of our conditions too, which is interesting. And that lives inside of system32. So you can see, I mean, this ran against the entire system. And it didn't take that long if you kind of watched all through it. And I skipped on my side, obviously, but it did go at a pretty fast speed. It was able to search through every folder, file, and directory and look for a variety of strings that might indicate recon activity from a threat actor. And that's really powerful. And this is free, and this is open source. And this is a bit of a taste into intrusion detection and detection engineering. So I hope you enjoyed it. And it only gets more fun from here. So I definitely encourage you to play around with it, try to come up with some more YARA rules, and see what you can create for scanning the system.